Good morning and welcome to Hampton Lake Homestead. Are you planning to start a no-till garden but aren't sure where to begin? If so, keep watching because today I'm going to be doing a bed prep on an established bed so that it's ready for planting this spring. Most of my beds have already been prepped for the spring. I have one or two left, and the one that I'm going to be working on today is a 12 by 5 bed that I'm going to be planting with Rama tomatoes. I started this bed about 5 years ago and have had multiple crops in it, some of which I'm going to show before I get into the actual bed prep. So I want to make clear that this is a bed that has already been well prepped and already has very good weed control. I plan to do another video later where I start from scratch on just some grass side that I convert into a growing bed. This particular bed was basically woods up until 5 years ago. I cleared the ground and prepped this bed a year or two later. I put down fertilizer, then overlaid the ground with contractor paper, which is basically construction paper on a roll. I got mine from Home Depot. You could also use newspaper or cardboard. I then piled composted cow manure about a foot thick on top of the paper. A very thick layer is applied the first year. Afterwards, much less compost is required, and I'm not adding any to this bed this season. Then the beds were topped with a 6-inch layer of leaves. I also put down cardboard boxes, collapsed onto their sides for walking paths, and overlaid the cardboard with wood chips. I had pole beans growing in these beds. I also grew corn in the beds the following year, 1 year ago. Very late in the fall last year, I planted crimson clover and snow peas and overwintered them as a cover crop. There wasn't enough time for them to get established well before the frost came, but now that it's warming up, the crimson clover has returned. My first step is going to be to weed eat the little bit of crimson clover that is growing so that it is cut down to the ground. The roots will be left in place. If you don't have a cover crop, then you can skip this step. Now that I've weed eated, I'm going to temporarily rake aside the dead tree leaves that I've been using as mulch and the leaves from the crimson clover and weeds so that the bare ground is exposed. Now I'm going to mark my growing area and my walking paths. I keep stakes in the ground at the edge of the garden, and I'm able to attach a measuring tape to it to determine how wide I want my rows and beds. There is another stake at the other end of the bed used for lining up the other side as well. Using those stakes as anchors, I can then measure my beds. Starting from the edge of the bed, I plan to make the initial walkway 1 foot in length. You have to keep in mind that this initial loop is 2 inches in length, so any measurement that is made subsequently has to be done in the light of that 2 inches. So since I want to make the bed 12 inches wide, I'm putting my stake at the 10-inch mark, which is actually 12 inches from the other stake. I'm making the grow bed 5 feet wide, so I now go out to 5 feet 10 inches and place my second stake. After making the same measurements at the other end of the bed, I run string between all of the stakes to mark the boundaries between the beds and the walkways. Now I'm ready to apply the fertilizer. I use MicroLife organic fertilizer. I have previously calculated my fertilizer requirements and know that for the 60 square feet that I have, I need 2 1/4 cups. Most fertilizers give instructions based on a length of row, such as a 50 or 100 foot row. You can use that same number as your square footage since most rows are 1 foot wide. Also, keep in mind that a cup is equal to a half a pound of fertilizer. I lightly apply the fertilizer by sifting it evenly in the bed so that it is spread evenly. If you are fertilizing a larger area, you can use a broadcaster for this. Now at this point, you could put down sheets of either contract paper, newspaper, or cardboard, and then top with compost. Because this bed is already in such good shape, and because it had a small cover crop growing on it, I'm going to skip this step now. As your soil improves year after year, the less you will have to do to prepare it. Another step that I'm going to skip is raking or tilling in the fertilizer. Since I'm going to be adding thick mulch, I'm just going to leave the fertilizer on top of the soil so as not to disturb the soil any more than I have to. This fertilizer's NPK is 846, so it shouldn't burn the plants. Now a question you might have is, since I'm using the Back to Eden method of gardening, then why am I even adding fertilizer at all, since the Back to Eden method typically doesn't utilize fertilizer? And the answer is, because my soil sample still shows that I need it. I hope to eventually get to a place where I won't have to add any other supplemental fertilizers, but at this point, it's still needed. Now I've added the leaves back that I raked aside at the beginning and added more from my leaf pile that I collected during the fall. I gathered my leaves by using a push lawnmower with a collecting bag attachment. By using the mower, I have leaves that are already partly shredded. You can see that I put these leaves in about 6 inches thick. And now for the walking paths, I will put down cardboard and top with wood chips. In this case, I also have pine log edges from some milling that I recently did that I will also put down in the walking paths. These will be put down along with cardboard, and both will be covered up with wood chips so that it is not visible. And finally, here is the finished bed. As you can see, I've already planted it with Rama tomatoes, and it has also been lined around the edges with marigolds. What I showed in this video is a basic bed prep for an existing bed that is already in good shape with minimal weeds. Again, you could apply paper or cardboard, as well as compost if needed. But in this case, this bed looks just fine without the extra amendments. I hope you found this information on bed prepping helpful. Over time, I will continue to amend the soil by adding more compost, more mulch, and continuing to plant cover crops. As I do this, I hope that my soil fertility and organic composition will continue to improve. That's all for this time. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing as well. Have a great rest of the day.